Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. Nelson Mandela. Fear is something we all know too well. It lives quietly in the corners of our minds, shaping decisions we never realize, whispering doubts into moments of potential, and freezing us at the edge of change. But what if fear itself was not the enemy? What if the act of running from fear is what gives it power over us? The moment we stop running, everything begins to change. Backhand index pointing right before we dive deeper. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Psyche Glimpse so you never miss new explorations of psychology, philosophy, and the human condition. The nature of fear. Fear is one of the most primal emotions. From an evolutionary perspective, it protected our ancestors from predators, natural disasters, and threats to survival. But in modern life, fear is rarely about lions in the tall grass. Instead, it manifests as anxiety about failure, rejection, loneliness, or mortality. Our nervous systems, however, don't always distinguish between physical threats and psychological ones. The body reacts the same way: racing heart, shallow breath, tense muscles. The philosopher Soren Kierkegaard once described fear, or more precisely anxiety, as the dizziness of freedom. It arises because we stand before infinite choices, uncertain of which path to take. To be human is to feel fear. The problem is not fear itself, but our relationship to it. Why running from fear makes it stronger. When we avoid fear, we give it control. Psychologists call this avoidance reinforcement. The more you run from something, the more the brain believes it must be dangerous. Over time, even small fears grow into towering walls. Avoidance shrinks life. It narrows opportunities and keeps us locked in cycles of hesitation. Carl Jung famously said, "What you resist not only persists but grows in size." Fear gains power because we feed it through avoidance. By running, we strengthen the very thing we're trying to escape. The turning point, facing fear. The moment of change comes when you stop running. When you pause, turn around, and meet fear directly, something remarkable happens. It begins to lose its grip. Neuroscience shows that exposure reduces fear. Each time we face what terrifies us, the brain rewires itself, signaling, "This is not as dangerous as I thought." Philosophy echoes the same truth. Seneca, the Stoic philosopher, wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Fear is often a phantom, louder in thought than in reality. The act of facing it reveals its true shape. Fear is a teacher. When you stop running, fear becomes a teacher. It shows you where you have been hiding, where you have unfinished growth, and where meaning waits to be uncovered. Fear points directly to the places where transformation is possible. Psychologists often remind us, anxiety is not always a signal of danger, but sometimes a signal of significance. It points to what matters most. The fear of speaking may hide the desire to be heard. The fear of failure may mask the call to create. The fear of intimacy may conceal the longing for love. In this way, fear is not an obstacle, it's a guide. When faced, it shows us who we are and what we value. How fear shapes identity. Fear doesn't just live in the background, it shapes who we become. From childhood, we develop identities around what we fear. A child afraid of rejection may grow into a people pleaser. A teenager who fears failure may avoid challenges, becoming the cautious one. Fear silently writes the script of our lives if left unchecked. Psychologists describe this as fear-based identity formation. The self becomes organized not around desire or purpose, but avoidance. Instead of asking, "What do I long to do?" we ask, "What will keep me safe?" The result is a life of shrinking possibilities. But when we stop running, we reclaim authorship of our story. Fear no longer dictates who we are, we begin to choose. The psychology of avoidance versus acceptance. Avoidance feels safe in the short term, but it robs us of long-term freedom. Acceptance, by contrast, feels terrifying at first but leads to lasting peace. Modern therapies such as acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT, emphasize this truth. When you open yourself to fear, rather than fighting it, you gain the ability to live fully. The paradox is clear. Running from fear keeps us trapped, but leaning into fear sets us free. Acceptance doesn't mean enjoying fear, but acknowledging its presence without letting it control us. Like a storm cloud passing across the sky, fear is temporary, it loses power the moment we stop struggling against it. What great thinkers taught about courage. Philosophers and psychologists across history have returned to the theme of courage. Aristotle described courage as the balance between cowardice and recklessness, the ability to act rightly despite fear. Nietzsche went further, suggesting that great individuals are those who walk directly into fear and suffering, using it as the crucible of greatness. Modern psychology echoes this. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act in its presence. Fear signals danger, but courage transforms that signal into a challenge. To finally stop running is to awaken courage within yourself, transforming fear into freedom. Every time you stop running, you reclaim energy once lost to avoidance. That energy becomes freedom, the freedom to choose new paths, to take risks, to speak honestly, to love fully. Psychologists note that confronting fear often produces a rebound effect, an unexpected surge of confidence and clarity. The very fear that once held you prisoner becomes the fuel for liberation. This is why so many stories of transformation begin with someone facing what terrifies them. In confronting fear, you don't just survive, you expand. The hidden gifts inside fear. Fear feels like an enemy, but often it is a disguised messenger. Psychologists suggest that fear points directly to what we value most. You fear rejection because you long for connection. You fear failure because you deeply desire growth and achievement. You fear mortality because life matters to you. When you stop running from fear and instead ask, what is this fear protecting? You uncover hidden treasures. Every fear carries within it a map toward your values. Fear doesn't just expose weakness, it illuminates meaning. Facing fear reveals purpose. Viktor Frankl argued that human beings can endure almost anything if they have a clear why. Fear often clouds that why, but confronting it sharpens clarity. For example, someone afraid of public speaking often discovers that beneath the fear lies a passion for sharing ideas. A person terrified of commitment may find that love is the deepest longing beneath the resistance. Purpose emerges when you no longer avoid the places that scare you. The very arena of your fear is often the stage of your destiny. To run toward fear is to step onto the path where purpose and meaning reside.
Failure as a guide, not a sentence. Much of fear is rooted in the terror of failure. But failure, far from being an ending, is one of the most powerful teachers. Psychologists call this post-traumatic growth, the idea that struggle and failure can lead to greater wisdom, resilience, and perspective. When you stop running from failure, you see it for what it truly is, a guide. Every failure contains feedback, showing you what doesn't work and pushing you closer to what does. Those who stop fearing failure are free to create, to innovate, to live fully without chains. Stories of resilience. History is filled with examples of people who transformed fear into strength. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison yet emerged with a spirit of forgiveness instead of bitterness. Helen Keller, who faced the unimaginable challenges of blindness and deafness, became a symbol of resilience and learning. Even ordinary people, those who survive illness, loss, or despair, often testify that fear and hardship became the turning points of their lives. These stories remind us that courage isn't abstract, it's lived. Every man and woman who has ever faced fear and refused to be broken by it offers proof. You too can rise. Life beyond fear. When you finally stop running, fear loses its grip. It doesn't vanish, but it changes shape. Fear becomes a companion rather than a captor. Instead of blocking your path, it walks beside you, reminding you that what you are doing matters. Living beyond fear doesn't mean you never feel it again, it means you no longer allow it to dictate your choices. You live freer, lighter, more authentically because you're no longer bound by invisible chains. Life opens in ways you never imagined because fear is no longer the barrier. The philosophy of courage. Philosophers have long wrestled with the meaning of courage. Aristotle described it as the balance between cowardice and recklessness, the golden mean that transforms fear into strength. Existentialists like Kierkegaard and Sartre insisted that true freedom comes only when you face anxiety and choose in spite of it. Courage, then, is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to act while fear still whispers. It is the moment you write, speak, love, or build, knowing failure is possible but meaning demands the risk. Courage is fear transformed into movement. Daily practices to dissolve fear. Philosophy and psychology alike remind us that fear is tamed through practice. Small daily acts of courage accumulate into strength. This might mean speaking up in a meeting, initiating an honest conversation, or taking a step toward a long-held dream. Mindfulness helps. When you observe fear without judgment, its power diminishes. Reflection helps. When you journal or meditate, fear takes shape as words and images, no longer an invisible shadow. Action helps most of all. When you act despite fear, you prove to yourself that fear is survivable. Courage is not built in a day. It's built in thousands of tiny choices that, together, reshape your life. The freedom of authentic living. The final gift of facing fear is authenticity. When fear no longer rules you, you stop living for approval, for safety, or for conformity. You begin living as who you truly are. Authenticity means alignment between your thoughts, feelings, and actions. It means your life is no longer dictated by avoidance, but by truth. And in that truth lies freedom. The freedom to be seen, to be vulnerable, to be fully alive. This is the reward of no longer running from fear. Not just less anxiety, but a life that feels whole, purposeful, and real. When you stop running from fear, you discover it was never chasing you, it was leading you. On the other side of fear is not emptiness, but freedom, purpose, and the life you were always meant to live.